Have you ever had an interruption to your prayer time? Silly question. Of course we have. But this was an incredible interruption to Jesus' prayer time. John the Baptist has just been killed. Jesus' cousin, Jesus' forerunner. And Jesus is deeply moved by this. He feels the pain because he knows that his own time is coming soon. He knows there's not long to go. And he needs to be alone. Needs to be alone with his Father who he's known since before all eternity. He's exhausted, he's physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted. Because we forget that even though he was the eternal Son of God, he was also fully human. And he felt the emotions and had the physical needs that we have. And so this pain was with him. This need for rest was with him. It's only as we start to look at Jesus in his fullness that we can understand the cost of our salvation, the depth of his love, and the wonder of what he has done and continues to do for us and in us and with us. His coming crucifixion was looming very much in his mind at this time. Not the physical pain, terrible though that was. Absolutely horrific. One of the worst ways of inflicting pain that's ever been invented. But that was minor compared with the spiritual pain that he knew was coming. Because he knew that when he went on that cross, that he, the perfect one, he, the totally good one, he, the 100% innocent one, would have come upon him and through him all of the sin of all mankind from the beginning of creation. He would know the horror, the absolute horror of every wrong attitude and action and thought that has ever taken place. And at that time, the scripture says it, at that time he became sin for us. And at that instant, his Father, who he had known eternally, Father, Son and Spirit together, at that instant, his Father would withdraw. Because God cannot look upon sin, and at that instant he was all sin that there has ever been. And that relationship was momentarily broken. That eternal relationship of love that they had known together is momentarily broken. And it just rips out of him the words, my God, why have you forsaken me? My God, why? He knew why. But our sin, no, let me be more accurate. My sin caused that unbelievable break in relationship momentarily, though it was. That was the cost. That is the cost of the wrong that I do. This didn't come as a surprise. He knew it was coming because the words that came out of him, of course, were that first verse of Psalm 22. And they knew Psalm 22. The Jews knew Psalm 22 backwards. And they would have gone and they would have looked at it again and they would have read it through and they would have seen all the allusions to the Son of God and the cost that he must pay for us. That he was the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. But also, this was his calling. It went right back because he was there. He was one of those who said, let us make man in our image. Those were not easy words to say. We meet them in Genesis 1. We tend to think the big break in the Bible is between Old Testament and New Testament. No. The big break in the Bible is between Genesis 1:25 and Genesis 1:26. Because up until Genesis 1:25, it's all about creation, and it's a beautiful creation, and it's the wonderful garden, and it's the glory of the universe, and it's all of the things that Jesus has done. But in 1:26, God, in his fullness, Father, Son, and Spirit, the Son's involved, says, let us, the plural us, let us make man in our image. Let us make man in our image. The sheer wonder of those words. Not the wonder of the physical creation, but the wonder of the eternal Son of God there saying, let us make man, knowing that meant he would have to become human and have to die on a cross for this creation that he was about to make. Right back then, Genesis 1:26, the pain of the cross begins. Genesis 1:26 contains John 3:16 within it. It contains Revelation 13. It contains all of that. It contains this incredible act of loving creation that would lead to the Son of Man becoming human, the eternal Son, and suffering death in our place. And this was with him throughout history. Remember the story of Abraham, when Abraham's told to offer Isaac, and at the last minute they find a lamb? He was Isaac, he was the lamb. There was no one coming to rescue him at the last second. There was no saving. Throughout the history of the Old Testament, as they offered sacrifice after sacrifice, lamb after lamb after lamb, every time he, the eternal Son of God, is there, knowing that every one of those lambs points forward to what will happen to him, to his future. And that is the pain he's in. And the crowds, the uncaring crowds, aren't interested. He needs to get away. He needs to be somewhere quiet. He needs to be with his Father. The crowds have only one thought. This is the man who gives free food. This is the man who makes us well. This is the one we can use. This is the one who we can get to give us what we want. This is a source of our satisfaction. As he's thinking of these things, and he needs to get away, and he needs to be with his Father, and he needs some quiet, and he wants to go across. But the crowds follow. And the crowds come. And the crowds demand. And they all want their little bit of him. Are we ever like that? Do we ever want our little bit of Jesus? Jesus, fix this problem. Jesus, make me feel better. Jesus, make me well. All legitimate things. All legitimate. But is that the depth of our relationship with him? Or are we able to go beyond the crowds? And are we able to say, Jesus, you first. Jesus, I want to live for you. Jesus, I want to bring glory to your name. Jesus, I want other people to know about you. Jesus, I want my life to be a thank you letter to you. Isn't that what Christianity means? Isn't that what it's all about? that we live each day and each hour and each moment and each time, and our life is our gift to him. He gave us life, and we give it back, and we say thank you. Thank you with my words, thank you with my thoughts, thank you with my actions, thank you with my plans. Lord, I live as a thank you note to you because I know the amount of love you have for me, and I know what it cost. I know what it cost, as well as a human being ever can, that I could have this. Well, they followed him, and Jesus responds to them. Here he is, physically, spiritually, emotionally exhausted, and the crowds come. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, what would your response have been? I know what mine would have been. Oh no, give me a break. I need a rest. I mean, I've said those words, but not him. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them. And he healed their sick. Now, we read over things like that so quickly. Let's stop and let that soak in for a couple of minutes. He saw the crowd. He had compassion on them. And he healed their sick. Now, let's get this straight. Jesus healing sick isn't a matter of going, oh, you're okay, right, you're well. This is a giving. This is a draining. This costs him. This is not easy. And the crowd just kept coming. Just kept coming. They wanted the healing. They weren't all that interested in the message. They wanted what they could get from him, but they didn't particularly want him. Where does that leave us? What is the desire of our hearts when we think of Jesus? Is the desire of our heart what he can do for us and has done for us and continues to do for us? And that's important. Or is the desire of our heart just to know him better, to grow our relationship with him, to give him joy? Does that often come into our thoughts? Do we wake up in the morning and say, what can I do today to give Jesus joy? What can I say? What can I think? How can I give him joy? How can I, and this might sound really weird, but how can I enrich the life of my Lord? And of course, there's only one real way. And that's by copying him and enriching the lives of those around us. Anyway, the crowd's there. The disciples, I love the disciples. They're so down-to-earth, practical guys. Jesus is there healing the sick. Jesus is changing the world. They're wondering if there's enough food to go around. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place, and it's already getting late. I love this next bit. It's so me. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. I mean, they did care, didn't they? They did care at a totally earthly level. They have just watched him, exhausted, come there and all through at least half a day heal people. They have just seen him work miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. And they come to him and they don't say, look, it's getting late and the people are hungry. What can we do? How can we help? Well, we know you're the Son of God. We've seen what you can do. What do you want us to do? How do you want us to work through this situation? No, they say what I probably would have said in the same situation. They say, send them away to the surrounding villages so they can get themselves something to eat, so they can get some food. But Jesus responds as we well know. One of the problems when we read the Bible so much, and don't get me wrong, I think reading the Bible often is fantastic. It's wonderful. I love it. I read the Bible through every year, as I'm sure most of you do. It just soaks in and soaks in. And every time you read it, there's something new and some other little nuance that is just glorious. So yeah, we need to know that. We need to know that. But we also need to make sure that it flows out as well as in. And I love what Jesus does now. It's so beautiful. He could have just said, okay, I'll make some food. Boom, there it is, you're right. But he doesn't. He says, they don't need to go away. Don't you love this? You give them something to eat. It's just so beautiful. He just stands back. No, bit of a smile. You give them something to eat. Now you can see the 12 guys suddenly in a circle. Hey, what's going on here? We've just told him there's no food. He's saying we should give them something to eat. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? So they come back to Jesus. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. We've only got 5 little loaves and 2 fish. They don't catch on. They scout around. They find some poor boy who hasn't eaten his lunch yet. And they grab him and they grab his lunch. They've seen Jesus do miracle after miracle, but they're not even thinking of that. Their thoughts are exactly on our level at this time. So they drag this child along to Jesus. Look at the 5 loaves, small loaves, 2 small fish. And they say, we can't do anything. There's no way out. Now they've seen him do miracles. And yet they say we have no resources. You know, it breaks my heart when the church does that at times. Over all the years in ministry and other things, I've sat in deacons' meetings and heard people say, we don't have any resources. We don't have any money. We can't do it. And I might flash us straight back to this situation. No, they don't have any human resources. But they got the eternal Son of God standing there with them. And he plays them along. Again, I love this. He doesn't say, it's okay, I'll do it. He says this. He says, bring them here to me. They bring the little bit of food. He said, and directed the people to sit down. So he does nothing. He doesn't say, bring it here, boom, there you go, there's thousands of food, you're all right. He says, no, get them all to sit down in groups. So the disciples, you ever tried making 5,000 people sit down in groups? But away they go and they play around with them. They get them all sitting down somehow or other. And all the time they're thinking, gee, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, where are we going to go? So he breaks the bread, breaks it up into 12 bits, gives it to the disciples, and it's still only a little bit. I mean, they got a little bit of loaf, a little bit of fish. And he says, feed them. Now, if ever Jesus is laughing inside, he's doing it right now. I mean, he really is. Go and feed them. And you can imagine Peter comes to the first group of 50. Don't take too much. It's got to go a long way. You can see the reality of the situation. But then they take and they take and they take. And can you see what's happening to the disciples? Can you see it growing within them? Is it still there? And I reckon about half an hour later, Peter's saying, take as much as you want. There's tons. The Lord's done a miracle again. And there's tears streaming down his face. And he learnt something. And that's what it was all about. It wasn't really about feeding people. That was only part of it. It was about teaching. Teaching Peter, teaching the others. And they ate. And they had what they needed. And Jesus continues to stretch them. They needed to rely on God's resources, not their own. Do we as the church realise this? Has the meaning of this got through to us? That God is unlimited? Don't put limits on what he can do. So we go through. They all ate and were satisfied, and the number of those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. This fantastic thing has happened. They've eaten. But Have they been changed? And sadly, the answer is probably not. Because it wasn't that much longer that some of those same people were screaming out at the top of their lungs, "Crucify him, crucify him." And let's not put any blame, because we're no different. Sadly, we're no different at all. God acts. He acts in a wonderful way. And they all eat, and they're all satisfied. And they ate and were satisfied, and so on, as we've seen. Jesus then sends them away. Because why did Jesus come here in the first place? Why did Jesus come across? Was it to feed 5,000 people? Was it to do a miracle? No, it was to pray. Do you realise that all of this was no more than an interruption to Jesus' prayer time? So the next time I complain that my prayer time's been interrupted, I'll think back. He's gone to pray. The people have followed. He's healed them all day. He's fed them. He sends them away. They've got all they want from him. He's no use to them anymore. They're healed. They're full. Let's go. And he comes on to do what he came for. He made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead of him. And after he had dismissed them, he went on a mountainside by himself to pray. People came to Jesus as an anonymous crowd. They still do at times. He saw them as individual people. This is where we need to be Jesus to those around us. There are no anonymous crowds. There are no groups. There are individual people made in the image of God, for whom Christ died, whom he wants to touch and to love and to build through us. We may not feed 5,000, we may not do miracles, but we can be the same Jesus to those as he in and through us touches their lives, changes them. Every person we meet, every person here, every person not here, is someone made in the image of God, for whom Christ died, and who the Creator of the universe loves. Think of this, something that stays with me always. I may be, you may be, the only Jesus some people ever meet. You may be, I may be, the only Jesus some people ever meet. Also through this we learn the wonderful, wonderful fact that the infinite Creator of the universe adapts himself to our level. I think of the way I stoop down to talk to my grandchildren, which, by the way, are the greatest grandchildren in the world, but that's by the by. The way I stoop, I kneel down next to them to be at their level. I don't stand here and get them to talk up to me. I'm there beside them. The God we serve is a kneeling God. He has kneeled down next to us. His arm is around us. And he's saying, tell me about it. Share with me what's on your mind. Share your pain. Share your love. I'm here. I'm beside you. My arm's around you. Why not spend some time today and tomorrow with the kneeling God? Never forget who we are and where we live. Never forget who we are and where we live. We are the beloved child of God, and we live within his hug, always.